Hi, and welcome to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast presented by Wolf Precision Incorporated, where we learn about and share long range shooting and custom rifle building. I am your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome to the show. Hi, and welcome to Wolf Precision's Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome to the show. In this episode, we want to talk about reloading, and it is not that difficult. So get out of the rabbit hole and reload and shoot. So in this episode, we want to touch base and go back and revisit reloading for new shooters. All right, so before we get started, I do want to say a quick thanks to Krieger Barrels. Krieger is the maker of fine cut rifle barrels, and you can go to KriegerDirect.com and get yours today. They have an in-store selection of readily available barrels, and in today's market, that is a great thing. So if you're in the need for a great barrel, stop over to KriegerDirect.com. We also want to thank MDT. MDT Chassis also is a great sponsor of the show. We use a lot of their chassis here at the school and for multiple different things. So stop over to MDT, that's MDTTac.com, MDTTac.com today. All right, so right out of the gate, the shooting sport is alive and well, and that goes for the reloading. Of course, in today's market, that probably means more than anything because a box of match-grade ammunition for a 6.5 Creedmoor might cost you in excess of $50 to $60 now for 20 rounds. Bit pricey, yes. Needed, yes, if you don't reload. But this podcast, I'm going to touch base and go back. And I just want to give my honest opinion and feelings on this one because we had a really great customer stop over yesterday, pick up his rifle, spend some time at the range with it. And when we got back, he started asking some very intelligent questions about reloading. And, you know, he's a retired professional in his own right and smart. However, though, he's fallen trapped to the same thing many new shooters fall victim to. So a common thing that we get asked is, do we teach a reloading class? And the answer is no. We decided years ago, along with our insurance companies, that we can hold no such thing here, as well as we really don't think it's necessary. So I just want to touch base on what this customer had asked. And I really think, it's disheartening. It puts a roadblock up for new reloaders. It puts a lot of doubt in their mind that there's all this, superstitious magic type of thing. And, how do you break down and start your loads? And then how do you subdivide? And then how many groups of each powder? And then how do you subdivide that? And then once you get there, do you measure to the ogive and tip and subdivide that? And, I'm looking at him and he was basically asking me, what's your process for reloading? And, what's this whole big laundry list of things that you do to get a load worked up for a rifle? And, he was trying to ask along, how difficult is it? Go through with me the difficulties that you run into and, how hard it is to make these great shooting loads. Because we went out and shot the 22 Creedmoor with 88 grain ELDs and he shot a 1/4-inch group. He is tickled pink. But when I, sat back and thought about it for a minute, and I've been thinking this because we talked about it reloading, and we did a couple podcasts on, reloading for long-range shooting, and somebody chimed in on one of the hosting, sites that put our podcast up and said that, there's just isn't enough meat on the bone, that we're just, not really answering any questions. And, he went off to this thing that we were just giving some general information that was worthless. Well, I'm going to revisit that, but I'm going to talk to you about talking to this customer. So sitting back and thinking about it, I was like, it's not. It's actually, it's easy. What do you want me to say? Finding really great shooting loads is not hard to do. As a matter of fact, when I was talking to him, I'm sitting there thinking like, almost every rifle we reload for, it was like either we are the luckiest people on the planet as far as finding great shooting loads, or it's just not that difficult. There's some common sense things that you have to do. Like, for example, the first thing we tell everybody to do is, read the owner's manual. So when you buy a Redding reloading kit or a Hornady reloading kit, or you can go and buy some older books that were printed years ago to go over full-length sizing brass, how to set that up, that goes over seating primers and how to measure your charge weight and how to measure your seating depth. But then you get into bench rest shooting, and all of a sudden it's like this magic formula that only 3 people in the world know the process to, and we hold this secret, dear to our chest, and there's this magic stuff we don't tell you. There's no truth to that. We always tell guys, you are going to give yourself a lot of heartburn and heartache trying to duplicate what these people say they do and go through to find these magic loads, than if you were just to honestly buy a full-length sizing die, a competition seating die, throw some powder in a case, seat the bullet properly, and go and shoot. So we were talking about reloading and advanced hand loading, and I was honest with him. I'm like, look, don't go down those rabbit holes. No, I don't start with 65 loads when I go to the range in 1 grain increments, and then 65 loads in 3/10 grain increments, and then 65 loads in 1/10. No, I actually don't do any of that. To be quite honest with you, my loads are very simple. First, I start with a caliber that's known to be easy to load for, which, for example, like 308, 6.5 Creedmoor, 223, 300 Win Mag, 6.5 by 47. I mean, legendary easy. Same way with the 22 Creedmoor. If you can put powder in a case and count from 1 to 10, you can probably make great shooting reloads. There's nothing magic about this. And I was trying to tell him that, he was talking about all these books and all these forums and all these things that he's had to read that you have to do, and he's spending all of his time working on reloads at the range rather than practicing and shooting. And so I was telling him, look, just load. Honestly, go out, find, a couple pet loads that people say, safe loads. Keep in mind, safe loads, do your research, make sure somebody isn't loading some crazy hot load, right? Go on to Hodgkin's website, and they'll tell you minimum and max loads. Go on to Hornady's. But go out and try to find some pet loads that are safe loads, and you'll start to see a pattern emerge, like H4350. That is like the go-to 6.5 Creedmoor powder, I think. H1000, 4350 in the 22 Creedmoor. But you'll start to see that there's this like pet area where a lot of guys have this sweet spot for a load. That's a great place to start. And then, start, maybe a grain less than that and work to a grain over in 3/10 increments and just shoot a couple groups. Once I do that, I'll look and see if one of them holds promise. If one of them holds promise, guess what my load is? It's that load until I find one better. And so I was explaining to him, I'll do 1 or 2 range trips. Honest to God, my range trips are like 20 and 30 rounds working up loads. And we've done this for years, and we have great shooting rifles and great shooting, ammo at the school. But I'll go and I'll load up a couple bullets. I'll always stay off the lands. I don't chase the lands. I also shoot bullets that aren't finicky on jump. So, like, I don't shoot VLDs, per se. I shoot, like, ELD match or boat tail hollow points that are known to tolerate big jumps. So, for example, our school rifles in 6.5 Creedmoor, we've never adjusted the bullets forward to compensate for the worn-out throat. So we have guns on the lines that have 2,000 rounds through them and 600 rounds through them. They shoot the same ammo, set to the same depth, and they shoot the same. I don't chase the throat. I don't chase the lands. A good shooting rifle, you will find a lot of great shooting loads for it quickly and easily unless there's something wrong with it. Then just fine-tune that load a little bit. A poor shooting rifle, get ready. You're going to spend the next 6 months micromanaging your loads, trying to find something to shoot out of it. It's not the loads. It's the rifle. And so one of the things about a really good quality rifle is it shortcuts or bypasses this massive headache and drama of driving yourself crazy going and working on loads. So honest to God, as I stand here, I'll go and shoot 4 or 5 loads. That's it. I'll pick one that shoots great. Like usually there's 1 or 2 in there to hold a lot of promise. Like, wow, that's a good shooting load. And so next time out, I'll shoot it again. But this time maybe I'll bump up 2/10 and down 2/10 for a couple just variables to see if it's getting better or see if it's getting worse or if it makes any difference at all. And a lot of times it really doesn't. Like we have a load for our 22 Creedmoor. We can bump up and down like 3 or 4 tenths of a grain and it really doesn't do anything. And same thing with like other bullets. We can load a massive amount of other bullets that are around that weight, and the sweet spot is all around that load that we have. It's what's amazing is for example, Walt's one of our instructors here at the school. Is he's done a lot of research with the 22 Creed with tons of different bullets, and he keeps coming back like there's not a bad shooting load. They all shoot pretty good. Some of them shoot really good, like just wow type deal. But there isn't one that's like, wow, that wouldn't be acceptable. There's a lot of groups that were really acceptable, that were good groups. And then you just tighten them up. So here's what I'm trying to tell you. If you're going to get into hand loading, which a lot of shooters now are going to be forced to do. So the price of ammunition, if you really do shoot a lot, you are going to spend a small fortune trying to get enough ammunition saved up to go and shoot a couple matches or to go and practice. It's really expensive. But get yourself a really nice, simple single-stage press reloading kit. Buy the Redding Big Boss kit with the balance beam scale. You really can't go wrong with it. Balance beam scales are actually very accurate. Get a full-length sizing die. Don't mess around with neck dies. You can form donuts. You can get stiff bolt closes from it not working the body. We shoot in field matches, not bench rest. So we want the bolt to work every single time. We want feeding functioning perfect every single time. No stiff closes. So work the shoulder, work the brass the way it's supposed to be, full-length size each and every time. Competition seating die, and that's it. Good powder, good primers, and start. And you'll be surprised on a good rifle that you might pick out, like, for example, I'm just going to throw out a caliber. Like, let's just say we're going to reload the 308. Varget is a very well-known powder for 308. There's lots of loads that are known to shoot really well. Some are hot. Now, be careful going on forums and stuff because some guys push the 308 way beyond what it's supposed to or way over max. So do your research. But you'll find that there's a lot of loads for Varget for a 308. And so you start looking at them and saying, oh, wow, everybody's hovering right around this number. So maybe, and it's safe, I'm not over max, so I'll start a little bit below that and work up through it a grain or two. We always stay off the lands. 17, 20,000s. We don't go any closer. You'll find a lot of researchers saying that you should jump 85,000, 75 to 85,000. And we have found it really doesn't make any difference. For example, our school guns, they have a lot of wear and tear on them when they're getting older, and we're getting a lot of jump because we don't chase the lands, and they shoot the same. That's the nice part about a quality rifle, straight throat, good ammunition, consistently made, and it's fine. So find a nice little sweet spot, load up 10 rounds as your baseline for you think that's your target load, and then load up, down 3/10 of a grain, load up a 5-shot group, down 6/10 of a grain, down 9/10. And same thing with the other way. Maybe go half grain increments, go from your target weight up 0.5 grains, up 1 grain, getting closer to max. And then just go out and shoot 4 or 5 groups. And you'll be shocked that there's going to be 1 or 2 in there that's like, wow, that's actually a good shooting group. So what do? I shoot that group. I shoot that load. So I'll use that to start practicing and training because every time I go to the range, I'm going to shoot it. And I'll know right out of the gate within a couple range trips that, hey, this is a pretty decent shooting load. And then I'll just slowly start modifying it a little bit. So every time I go to the range and practice, I might tweak it, rather than shooting, let's just say, I'm going to throw out a number here. Let's just say my magic load is 40 grains of whatever. So my third or fourth range trip out, I might load 40.2. And maybe I'll load up a couple at 39.8 just to see if it makes any difference. Or if there's something like, boom, that it's just like, wow, it goes from 0.2 to 1.1. But a lot of times you'll find that it really doesn't move all that much. Maybe I'll play with the seating depth. So I'll load up 50 rounds to go and practice, but then I'll set 5 of them off to the side where maybe I'm going to jump them 75,000 and see what that does. But what I'm telling you is once you find a decent load, start practicing. Start shooting. If your gun is capable of a half a minute or better, that's capable of shooting a 5-inch group at 1,000 yards. As long as you're taking your time and reloading and throwing your powder charges appropriately so you get a good standard deviation, you're in the money. That's a great rifle. You can go and compete with that. And then just start trying to tweak it ever so slightly as you keep going back to the range and practicing and working on the load. Now, keep in mind, too, and this is a couple of things I want to point out. Number one, the most important thing, and I talked about this in a previous podcast, is make sure you get a bullet in the case the day you size it, because there's a spring back that happens. So as the bullet or brass goes into the die, it squeezes it together, and then it comes over an expander ball, opening the mouth. Make sure you get a bullet in that case mouth that day. Don't leave them. Don't full length size 500 pieces, and then go back and load them. Whenever you feel like it. Because what will happen is you're going to get a lot of inconsistent neck tension because the case mouse wants to sort of spring back to their original size. So if you're going to load 200 rounds and you size 200 rounds, make sure your plan is at the end of the day that there's bullets in all 200 of those rounds. Again, full length size. I don't play with neck tension. I don't use neck dies, any of that. I don't think as shooters in field conditions that there's any advantage, and there's pros and cons to doing that. You can do your research to find out what the pros and cons are, but I personally think the cons outweigh the pros, and so I just use a full-length sizing die. The other thing that I think is really important in this is taking your time, going and making sure that you're throwing it as accurate a powder charge as you can. I remember years ago, it was one of the proudest moments reloading that I can think of. I mean, the first time I pulled the trigger on a gun I ever reloaded for, I did like everybody else did. I closed my eyes. I'm like, oh boy, I hope this works. And I closed my eyes. I pulled the trigger. Gun went bang, hit the target. I didn't blow up. All's good. Okay, so I got a checkbox in experience without dying. Great. But let's talk about going one step further. I had a Redding Big Boss kit that had an old school balance beam scale on it. And I had a trickler. I would trickle each charge to within as close to perfect as I can, just tapping the trickler, getting 1 or 2 grains in there, and I was shooting a 308. Now, it would take me on average to load 200 rounds from start to finish, and I was slow. Now, I want to keep in mind that I was probably a new shooter taking way too much time, but, 4 hours maybe to load 200 rounds, and now I probably do that in about 2 hours, which, again, single stage press, no progressive presses. They don't help in this type of shooting if you're looking for accurate ammunition. Again, one of the key things is making sure that you're throwing that powder charge. So balance beam scale is an awesome way to do it. No electronics involved, nothing to go out of tolerance. You can sit there and throw them all day. As long as you don't move the balance beam or bump anything, it's good. The electronic or digital powder throwers, you just have to make sure they don't go out of calibration and make sure you have a good one. Being plus or minus a grain or half a grain is a lot. And you'll find that some of them will float. So for new shooters, I personally think you're better off to use a balance beam scale and just learn how to reload. Leave all of that other technical stuff unless you really want to get into it and get like something like the auto trickler, which we have 2 now that can hold that type of tolerance that we're looking for. But if you don't, just get a balance beam scale. But go out, take your time, focus on making the best ammunition you can with the tools that you have and learn the art of it. So here's the story I want to tell you. It's one of my proudest moments of reloading. And, I reloaded simply for the reason everybody else did is I shot a lot and I couldn't afford to buy the ammunition. I like the varmint hunt. And so 308 federal gold medal match, it's not a great woodchuck round. It won't blow up on them. So I shot the 155 grain AMAX. So I had to reload. But I started reloading for the same reason everybody else did. It's what you had to do to afford to shoot a lot. It was really expensive. Now, the kit itself was, I think back in the day, $390 or close to $500. I got the trimmer and all the other little tools that you'll need, and I got the thing to clean the primer pockets. And then I really got into advanced hand loading, like neck turning and, squaring up the shoulders in the primer pockets and all that. I will tell you, you can bypass a lot of that headache of cleaning lesser quality brass up just by buying quality brass. So like Alpha Munitions, Lapua, you don't really have to do any of that type of stuff. You just have to focus on, full length sizing, priming, throwing the powder, seating the bullet, and you're off to the races. So back to the story. So I went to Oregon. I got invited out to spend some time, and the president of Savage Arms was going to be there. And I shot Savages back in those days, and had a 308, did some video work, have done really well with it. I actually placed in some matches shooting a Savage 308. And I went out there, and they were chronographing rifles. And my dad was there, so if you ever, want verification on the story, he was standing right there helping me because we were doing some filming. And they chronographed my 308, and they chronographed 5 rounds. My standard deviation was 1 with a balance beam scale, full-length sizing die, competition seating die. I seated the bullets as soon as I sized them. I took my time trickling up. And now I will tell you that there is a lot of luck involved. I'm sure there's other bullets in those 200 or 300 rounds that I loaded that would have thrown my standard deviation off more than what it was. I just got lucky that I got the 5 rounds that were that close. And the gentleman that was chronographing, turned around and was like, "Oh man, that's the best I've ever seen." Another guy was like, "Wow, hey, do you reload? Wow, how did you do that? What's your secret?" Here it comes. Here it comes, right? They want to know all these little things that you went down the secret rabbit hole that nobody else knows about, that you can make better ammunition than everybody else did. But it wasn't. I was actually a pretty new reloader using a big Bosch Redding kit, a balance beam scale, and a 2-die set. And there it is, just taking your time. So what am I saying? If you're going to get into hand loading, you're going to get into reloading, which I think a lot of people are doing now because of economics. It's just stupid expensive to buy factory ammunition right now. At $60 a box, are you really going to go out with your buddies on a Saturday afternoon and blow 100 rounds, shooting at clay pigeons on a bank somewhere? Probably not. I mean, that's just a lot of money to throw away. 5 boxes of ammunition at $60 each. Ooh. But if you can reload and you can get that down to $7 or $12 a box, especially once you start reusing the brass a couple of times, all of a sudden you don't mind so much. And so I think a lot of people are going to get into reloading, especially this year after this whole ammunition debacle. But I wanted to throw out there on the podcast, and I might get some heat for this, and somebody might, call out BS that you need to do all these crazy things. And if that's what you want to do, I am not faulting you. A lot of people love to get lost in the technical side of a lot of things, and they like to get lost in these micro details that they feel is going to make a difference. And if you feel it makes a difference, then it probably does to you, But what I'm saying is, as new shooters, you don't have to do any of that to make really high-quality ammunition. And I mean really high-quality ammunition that is capable of winning a match, that is capable of getting absolutely great standard deviations, and you don't need to do any of this magic woohoo that you see out there, and you don't have to go to the range for 6 months straight working on your loads, driving yourself crazy, which is what this customer was probably doing. Go out, get a couple loads worked up out of that first batch. If you get one that looks really promising, start shooting that one until you tweak it and get it to exactly where you want it to, and go and enjoy the rifle. Now, the last thing I want to warn you about when you're doing, hand loads, and then also with new rifles, is you'll see people chronograph. As soon as they get the rifle built, they're out there chronographing and checking standard deviation and using all this stuff to try to debate whether or not they have a good load or not. But you have to be careful with new barrels, whether they're factory or custom, because they do break in. And so you go out there with your first couple hand loads, first couple trips to the range, standard deviation isn't looking all that good. It could be just the barrel breaking in. It could be the clean barrel fouling out a little bit. So don't get too caught up in, getting that absolute perfect standard deviation and those numbers for making your click chart. Yeah, get them so you can get a good starter chart and start practicing and shooting at distance and having fun. But don't start leaning heavy on those numbers until you get at least 100, 150 rounds through the gun. Even at that, we find that most barrels actually complete their break-in process somewhere between 150 and 200. You're going to actually pick up velocity in the load as you're shooting. So from a brand new barrel to 100, 150, 200 rounds, that same load's going to pick up some velocity. The barrel's breaking in. The compounding thing with that too is once you shoot brass into a chamber, of course, it fills that chamber up, and now you've got more case volume, just ever so slightly. Now you are full-length sizing it back down a little bit to make sure it feeds and functions, but you're sort of blowing it out now to size, and now you're just bumping it back into shape. So sometimes you pick up a little bit of case volume too, which again can mess with your standard deviation or change your standard deviation. So be careful going out with brand new brass, doing all this load work, and then all of a sudden you check it again and something's not the same. It could be the barrel breaking in, or it could be you're actually shooting that second or third firing with that piece, that lot of brass, and all of a sudden you've got a little bit more case volume, which again can change your velocities and other things, pressure. So I just want you to go out and have fun, enjoy it, grab a couple manuals, read them through. That's exactly how I started. I just got 2 books and started reading them. One came with the kit from Reading, and one was a Reloader's Handbook from, I believe, Hornady, or might have even been like one of my dad's from the 60s or 70s, maybe my grandfather's. So my dad had all these old reloading handbooks, and I dug them all up, and the information's the same. So I was reading them from, some of the books might have been from the 60s or 70s to the new one that came in the Reading kit. And the whole process is about the same. It's not changed in the last 30, 40 years. Some of the equipment's changed, and of course you've got auto tricklers and other things, but the reloading process itself has pretty much stayed the same, which is one thing that I learned a lot. So going back in those books, there's no real big cutting edge advancement in the actual process. It's just some of the tools have gotten better. Now, before I call quits on this podcast, I do want to say just a quick thank you to TriggerTech. So TriggerTech's been a great sponsor of the show. Of course, you guys know we use them here in all of our school guns. We have them here on the walls for sale at the new armory. So if you're stopping and visit our new facility, our grand opening is going to be on June 5th. We are working with McMillan right now. We'll have about 6 or 7 McMillans. We're working with MDT, of course, to get a whole pile of MDTs here. From Oryx to AIs. AI is going to be coming out with a new stock. We'll have it here. So our goal here at the facility is have a place where somebody can come and get their hands on all these different stocks as well. But when you come, you'll see all kinds of TriggerTech triggers here. We love them to pieces. That's what we put in all of our guns. Customer that picked up his rifle yesterday. We'll post a picture of him up there on our Facebook page. He's a great customer, built himself a really nice rifle in an Oryx chassis. Which cost a whole, $395. And the rifle shot fantastic in 22 Creedmoor. So we'll have an Oryx chassis here, for example, just to get your hands on it, see what they're all about, and see if you like them. But TriggerTech triggers, they're easy to adjust. They're simple to put in and take out. They're self-cleaning, just nothing I can say bad about them other than just a really, really great trigger. So thank you, TriggerTech, for being part of the show here. We really appreciate it. You stop over to see triggertech.com and see if they make some great triggers for your rifle. But just to wrap up this podcast here, I want to tell you, don't get too caught up in the details. Don't get too far into the weeds, into this reloading thing. There's a lot of people that like to beat their chest and be experts in all these micro things that they do. And people like everything. They like to talk shooting. And so you get 4 or 5 guys in a room talking about reloading, and they just the conversation just goes completely off the rails as to all of these things that they do. And to a new shooter, it can be overwhelming. You're sitting there listening to this stuff, and you're like, holy crap. Am I ever really going to make ammunition like that? I'm here to tell you, you don't have to do that. You can if you like. And if you like to go down and get into the bushes and weeds like that, that's your cup of tea, then yeah, have at it. But I am telling you as a friend and as someone who's just trying to pass along good information, how I do it. I struggled trying to answer him because he was waiting for this big, long, gory detail process that was just absolutely horrible. And in my mind, I'm thinking, it's easy. I don't do any of that. I mean, I load up a couple loads, I find one that shoots good, and I go out and enjoy the daylights out of the rifle. And I tweak it a little bit along the way and see if I can't make it a little bit better. But I've never really had a problem. I honestly, my biggest problem has always been picking out which load to shoot, because usually I've got several that actually shoot really good right out of the gate. And, I can't relate to what he's trying to put himself through. And I'm going back in my mind and I'm like, in all the years I've been doing this, I'll be 50 this year, but all the years I've been doing this and reloading, I've never gone down and had all these struggles. I've never done or had to go down this extreme long road of micromanaging every load down to the 16th decimal and then tearing it apart and working, in and out 5,000s plus or minus 100. And I mean, for me, it's just, why would I want to? The load shoots, it's a good shooting load. I'm good with that. I'll fix it a little. I'll try to adjust it. Maybe I can get a little bit more out of it. But if it shoots good, I'm going out to shoot. I would rather spend my time at the range enjoying myself than micromanaging groups at 100 yards over and over and over and over again. That's not why I shoot. So I hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. You get a chance to stop over, check it out. It's wolfprecision.net. My name is Jamie Dotson. I'm your host, and you are listening to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building Podcast.